Hello and welcome to Auspol Explained. I'm your host David, and today we'll be discussing the shortest serving Prime Minister in all of Australian history, Frank Forde. What did he do? Why was his time in office so short? Well, let's find out. Part 1. His background. He was born in the town of Mitchell, Queensland in 1890 to two Irish immigrant parents. For a while he worked as a school teacher and a telegraphist, which is a person who sends telegraphs by Morse code, because it was the distant past and he was literally born in the 1800s. In 1917, when he was 26, he entered politics to run in the seat of Rockhampton and thus became the youngest member of the Legislative Assembly of Queensland. In 1922, he left state politics to run in the federal seat of Capricornia, and he won! Congratulations, Frank Forde, and thus he was on his way to becoming a central figure to the Federal Australian Labor Party. From 1925 to 1928, he was the only federal member in Queensland for Labor. It was 10-1 with the Nationalist and the Country parties filling all the other seats. Keep the number 1 in your mind because, spoilers, it's gonna be a recurring thing. When James Scullin became Prime Minister in 1929, Forde was given the position of Assistant Minister for Trade and Customs until 1931, when he was promoted to just a full Minister for Trade and Customs. He leveled up. When Scullin lost the election in 1931, it was a devastating loss for Labor. It was just a huge landslide against them, costing them a whopping 32 seats, about 2/3 of their previous number. And there were way less seats back in the past than there is now. Forde survived this election, and in 1932 he was made Deputy Labor leader under Scullin. After 10 years, he'd worked his way up from being a young, fresh face in politics to the second in command of the Labor Party. When Labor regained power in 1941, he was the Deputy Prime Minister, and behind John Curtin and General Douglas MacArthur, who had been put in charge of Australia's military forces during World War II, Forde was arguably the third most powerful public figure at the time. And for a while, when John Curtin was sick, Forde was acting Prime Minister in the years of 1944 to 45. Things were looking good for Forde, which brings us to Part 2. World War II. Everything goes wrong. It was July 1945, and for nearly 6 years war had raged across Europe. President Franklin D. Roosevelt had died recently of a hemorrhage, and we were under the helm of John Curtin, an incredibly popular Labor Prime Minister who had seen Australia through most of the war. He was so popular that he led Labor to a remarkable whopping victory of a 2/3 majority in the House of Representatives, and a majority in the Senate, a feat that's yet to be ever recreated in Labor's history. But in 1944, he'd had a heart attack and was often ill. In late April of 1945, Curtin's lungs became congested, leading to him being hospitalized for weeks. He returned to the lodge and died on 5th of July, 1945, not long before World War II would end. The Prime Minister was dead. This was the second time this had ever happened in history while a Prime Minister was in office. Who could fill his shoes? Well, Frank Forde was the Deputy Prime Minister and so assumed the role of Prime Minister on 6th of July 1945. But why didn't it last? When Forde took over as leader, it was in what's called as a caretaker capacity. Usually we use this term when an election has been called. It means that a government acts knowing that it might be replaced soon and thus makes no major decisions and doesn't implement anything unless it is deemed urgent. Parties democratically choose their leader, but as Forde was the deputy, he was given the position temporarily until a leader could be formally chosen. 8 days later, a vote happened. Forde put his hand up, naturally, as did Ben Chifley, Norman Macon, and H.V. Evatt. This, by the way, was not the first time Forde had contested the Labor leadership. In 1935, when Scullin resigned as leader, it was a close race between him and John Curtin. And here's the kicker, Forde lost 10 votes to 11. So close. He came in second by 1 vote. And once again, Forde came in second with 16 votes, Macon with 7, H.V. Evatt with 2, and Ben Chifley was the clear winner with 45 votes. He went on to become the 16th Prime Minister of Australia. In retrospect, it seems like a good idea to have put H.V. Evatt last, because he went on to lead Labor to 3 consecutive election defeats, which is, 3 more than Frank Forde did. Just saying. Ben Chifley would then go on to win the 1946 election and serve until 1949, when he lost to this recently created political party. You may have heard of it. It was called the Liberal Party, led by some dude, Robert Menzies? I don't know. I don't know. You may have heard of him. I don't know. Anyway, what happened to Forde afterwards? Well, Forde lost his seat in 1946 after 24 years, so decided to go off and be the High Commissioner in Canada. He was very successful at it, and also he really enjoyed this role, so Robert Menzies decided to even extend his 5-year term by an extra 9 months. It was apparently one of his favourite roles while in politics, so I'm glad. And then in 1953, Forde returned to Australia and decided to re-enter state politics for the Queensland seat of Flinders. He's the only former Prime Minister who has gone back into state politics. I have a video, by the way, on what Prime Ministers do after they retire if you want to learn more about that subject. Forde won the seat of Flinders in a by-election in 1955, and then won in a general election in 1956. But then he lost it again in August 1957 by, you'll never guess, a single vote. Once again, Forde's political aspirations were defeated by a single vote, so I'd never ever want to hear anyone ever complain ever again that single vote won't matter. Okay, it won't make a difference, because historically, now you have a literal bit of evidence, a historical precedent as to where one vote does actually matter. Every vote matters. For the love of democracy, just vote. Forde decided to contest these results naturally because they were so close, and they decided to have another by-election to resolve this issue. So then in 1958, Forde lost a little bit more definitively by like hundreds of votes. But Forde was never one to be deterred by one or even hundreds of votes getting in the way of his political career, and so he decided to just try again. And so he requested to be the candidate for Flinders once again in 1959. So Queensland Labor decided to have a bit of a vote on it and come back to him. Do you want to guess? It was 26 to 27. They had decided to deny him candidacy by 1 vote. A single vote. Which he, of course, appealed and so managed to run in the 1960 Queensland election, which he then lost. So that's unfortunate for him. And at age 72, he then tried to become a Labor candidate for the Senate and return to federal politics, but was unsuccessful. And that was it, really? That was the end of decades of politics for Forde. See, he may have been only Prime Minister for a week, but he had been a key figure in Queensland state politics and a prolific federal member too. Just over 20 years later, he died. In 1983 at age 92. And for another number 1 fact, only one other Prime Minister, Gough Whitlam, has lived for longer at age 98. Forde was given a state funeral and buried in Toowong Cemetery in Brisbane. Although he was actually a very long-serving politician, his legacy is that of being the man who served for only 1 week as Prime Minister. It seems that the number 1 haunted this man, being the one member from Queensland for 1 term, losing an election by 1 vote, losing leadership of Labor by 1 vote, losing pre-selection for candidacy by 1 vote, and being outlived by only 1 other former Prime Minister. But now that you've watched this video, 1 more person knows about the life and career of Frank Forde. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Please share by directly sending this to a person that you know on Facebook who you haven't talked to in 3 years. There's a copy of the script in the description where you can find all the citations I used to make this so you can read more about it or use it in assignments. Also, I have a Patreon. Thank you so much to everyone who supports me on Patreon. You can go and give me $3,000 if you want. That's not a joke. You can support my channel by giving me $3,000 per video. Or you can just give me $1 per video. That's 3,000 times more affordable. I would honestly pick that option. So do that. Comment down below what you would like to learn about next, and I will see you next time. Goodbye, YouTube.